I guess the question of the day is how important is the attorney in a
The transaction.
transaction? And do you recommend it? Does the realtor, does the buyer say, I've
Yeah,
got a friend that's an attorney?
yeah,
Like, how does that all
yeah.
work?
So you just made me cringe by saying my friend wants to, my
Right.
family friend is an attorney. It does kind of make me cringe. There's a couple things throughout the transaction that make me cringe, and that's one of them. Um, it's your attorney. They're representing you legally. Do you want somebody that you have no idea what their track record is with closings doing your real estate transaction for you? Or do you want somebody that either myself or your real estate agent has worked with over and over and over again and comes highly recommended? And I have a whole bunch that I work with that are amazing. Any seasoned real estate agent has a whole bunch of attorneys that they can recommend to that they've worked with over and over again. There's a lot of them out there that are amazing. There's also a lot that just don't do real estate day in and day out. And it is a totally different legal transaction than, say,
A divorce.
a divorce. Yes. And actually, that's very common. People get divorced and they sell and buy a house. I mean, it kind of goes together. So they want to use their divorce attorney.
Right.
And the divorce attorney has no idea what is involved with the real estate transaction. They have to get a title search. Well, they're not hooked up with a title company. There's nothing in their daily routine that says I do real estate. So you might think you're saving some money, or you know what, I know this attorney's phone number, I know where their office is, so I'm going to keep using them. You don't want to do that unless they specifically do real estate all the time.
Or it's part of their practice.
Correct.
Right.
Somebody in their practice does it, and that attorney is going to handle the real estate transaction for you. You see these things on the news. There's one right now. I just read it last weekend where a piece of property was sold to these other people and they started building a house on it. And the house is, I don't know, 2/3 of the way done. But the person who sold it to him wasn't the owner. Somebody like swooped in and it was a fraudulent transaction. And it was just a piece of land, and the owner didn't come and visit the land all the time. And all of a sudden one weekend they're like, oh, let's take a drive and check out the land. They're like, oh my God, there's a house on our piece of land.
Whoa.
So, stuff is going to happen, but if you have a good attorney, less stuff is likely to happen. I've had attorneys who don't understand the importance of, say, in a probate matter where 4 or 5 kids own the property, they don't understand the importance of making sure all of those people have signed the deed. The attorney wants to sign the deed on their behalf, but the attorney didn't have the authorization to do that. Well, how do you know that the fourth person who owned that property really did give the authorization to sell it? And 2 years from now, all of a sudden he shows up, he's like, I never said you could sell this property. And an attorney should never be signing something on behalf of their client unless they have a power of attorney that says they can sign it. These are just things that have come up over the years that I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Right.
And the attorney was totally fine in that situation, had no issue with signing for their client, even though they didn't have the authorization to. There was nothing in writing. And, as the lender, we're like, yeah, no, we need to see these people really want to sell this property.
Right.
That ended up all working out. But these are how these weird things happen that you see on the news. Well, how did that house get transferred to that person? Where was the real seller? Well, apparently the attorney for the buyer didn't do the title search correctly, or missed something, or God forbid, maybe they're in cahoots with somebody, and now you own a piece of property that you really don't own.
And I mean, it happens, right? It's far and few between, but you do hear those nightmare stories. There was that one in particular that sticks out in my mind of the attorney that got the wire transfer for the money, took it, and just fled
Left
town.
town.
Which, like, is it worth $300,000
No,
to just
definitely
ruin your
not.
career
You're done.
and have
You're
to
done.
hide out?
Yeah,
It's not
hopefully
worth
that's
it.
enough to get you to Mexico and
Yeah,
live for the next few years.
right.
Because what are you going to do? You're an attorney. It's
Right.
not, I guess you could build brick walls or something like that. I don't know.
Figure it out, but it happens, right?
It does. It absolutely does. And we do. Any lender is going to do vetting to make sure the attorney has been doing this for a while. And if they haven't, there's certain things they have to do. They have to connect with a title company. In Connecticut, we're a title company, so there's a title company in the background that writes the title insurance, which insures your title.
So what's the difference between a title and a deed?
Same thing.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's just
basically
words.
the same thing, different
Okay.
words. So a deed is a piece of paper for
The title.
ownership, for the for the
Got
title,
you, okay.
title in the property. They're basically the same thing.
So when you say doing a title search, you're
Yep.
meaning to check to see if any other person ever in the history of this house's existence has rights or
Right.
ownership
Anybody.
rights,
Yep.
and it hadn't been transferred
Correct.
or something.
Correct. Yeah, they do. I think 150 years. I think they go 150 years back.
Whoa.
I'm not sure what the standard is, but
Oh.
I think it's 150 years. I guess the thought process on that is, somebody has done a search at least a couple times before that would have found an
Something.
issue before that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, stuff comes up. Back when we had a lot of foreclosures, a lot of not a lot, but some of the foreclosures weren't done properly and they didn't foreclose people out. So God forbid the transaction went through fine and you bought the house and you own the house and, a few months down the road, somebody, a contractor had done some work to that house and it had a lien on the property and the contractor's like, hey, you owed me some money. Your title insurance, which you pay for at closing, will cover that loss. As long as it was done through the attorney and the attorney did what they were supposed to do, the title insurance insures your title.
So, for our listeners,
Yes.
what is a lien on a property?
A lien. So anybody that has a right to some sort of right to your property. I'll give an example. I have solar on my roof. So they have what's called a UCC filing on my property. And that's just letting people know, what, there's solar here and there's probably some money owed on that solar system. Ooh, all the planets in the sky.
Yeah.
So that's one example.
So that's a lien.
That's a lien
on the property.
That's a lien on the property.
Okay.
Saying it's kind of like a little reminder. Hey, something's going on. You need to check it.
A construction worker, you said.
Construction worker. Yeah.
So money owed on the construction
Yep.
that was done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They put a new kitchen in and they didn't like the work, so they decided not to pay the contractor. The contractor files a lien against them. And then it, going down a different route that ends up becoming a lawsuit. The owner's like, no, you don't. I don't owe you money, and But in the meantime, it's a little place setter to let people know something's going on here.
Okay.
A mortgage is a lien. It's your biggest lien ever.
Right.
Say you don't pay your taxes,
That's
to the town. That's a lien, and a lien is the taxes are superior to a mortgage. So that's the most important thing is taxes. But I mean, technically, taxes are a lien, even though not really, but you have to pay your taxes.
Right. That would be most important if taxes aren't escrowed.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. If you don't escrow your taxes and you don't pay them, the town's going to come after you really quick, and you need to get those taxes paid.
So I'm asking because it comes up sometimes when we're structuring a file that like you said, the mortgage has to be the priority lien.
Correct.
And so these would come up, you said, in the title search.
Would come
if
up in
there's
the title
any
search,
existing
anything.
liens.
Yeah. The power company, they have power lines behind your house, and there's 3 feet of your land that they needed to do their power lines. There's going to be a lien on your property. That's going to transfer over to the new person.
Gotcha.
But it's still there, and it's still something the new person wants to know. They want to know, okay, the power company owns a little bit of my land, or they have the right to use some of my land. Share a driveway with somebody. There's going to be something listed on the land records, most likely. Okay, you're sharing your driveway with the people next door. Are you okay with that? These are things your attorney's going to go over with you, and they should go over this with you.
Okay.
I don't know if they all do. I sure hope they do, because I'd want to know if somebody had some sort of right to my property.
So we've been throwing around some words I just want to clarify.
Okay.
In a transaction, as far as we're concerned, and the borrower should know this if they're different. So we have the buyer's attorney. You have the seller's attorney and the
Yes.
buyer's attorney.
Yes.
This is the attorney that's representing you in this transaction.
Yep.
There's also what's called the escrow company,
Correct.
right? And then there's the title insurance company.
Correct.
So how often are they all, like, is it all lumped under the buyer's attorney?
Yeah.
Does the buyer's attorney handle all this, or
Yep.
like are they separate?
Yeah, so I'll speak to the state of Connecticut, where we do most of our business, although I am licensed in Mass and in Florida as well. And Massachusetts is almost identical to Connecticut. And there's 5 or 6 other states that are just like us. We're called attorney states.
Okay.
So everything goes through the attorney. The title insurance, the attorney, in most cases represents the bank, and the attorney represents the buyer. So
okay.
those 3 things kind of get lumped together in the state of Connecticut. There's a lot of states out there, and I cannot speak to that other than I know that there's a lot of states out there that are an escrow company that there's no attorney involved. Everything is done through an escrow company. I don't know how it works, but it's different.
New York.
New York, New York has two attorneys. So New York is this, again, I don't know all the states. I do a little business in New York. New York, you cannot have an attorney represent the bank and the buyer.
Okay.
Where in Connecticut, it is allowed.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So in New York, and a New York transaction, the escrow and title insurance companies are different
Separate.
than
Correct.
the buyer's attorney.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we lump them together. And you have a right to have your own attorney in the state of Connecticut. Because at the end of the day, the attorney that you use, if there's just one attorney for the buying side, because obviously the seller has their own attorney, buyer seller cannot have the same attorney, absolute conflict of interest.
Oh, okay.
If there's a lender involved. So the attorney, first and foremost, is representing the lender. They're representing Total Mortgage. If you want to use that attorney to represent yourself, that's fine. It's going to save you some money. For the most part, the interests being represented are the same. The only time it would become an issue is if you, after closing, have some sort of issue with the lender.
Okay.
And you want to go back to that attorney and say, I have an issue with XYZ Mortgage Company. You represented me in my closing, and the attorney, time out, I represented the lender. You just used me to go over all your documents and explain everything to you. I cannot represent you against the lender because the lender
is priority.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's the only time it becomes an issue. I can't think of any case that's ever come up in my world that it ever became an issue. Yeah.
You're just aware that it's a potential.
Yes. Yeah. Very often, not very often, but sometimes we have a family member buying a house from a family member.
Okay.
And they have, Joe Blow attorney that's been the family attorney forever.
Joe Blow's such a good guy.
I know, he's everywhere. Literally everywhere.
Yeah.
But they're like, well, we've used him forever. We're going to use him for the sale and the purchase, and they're getting a mortgage, and we can't. What happens if that blows up?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just a conflict. How do we know that attorney's representing the bank and the buyer correctly? He might just be like, oh, we got to get this house sold for whatever reason. So cannot use, if there's a lender involved, you cannot use the same attorney on the sales side.
Attorneys don't make commission like a realtor and lender.
Attorneys do not make commission. So your original question was who refers the attorney. So for the most part, the client spends a lot of time with your real estate agent, and there's a great relationship that usually forms there. And usually the real estate agent refers the attorney.
Okay.
Sometimes by the time the client gets to me under contract, the agent doesn't have any contacts, and that's when I will kind of jump in and say, hey, do you have an attorney? I always ask them first if they have an attorney. If they say no, I recommend a couple attorneys. And I say call them, see what personalities fit the best. If they say yes, then we have a discussion of, what the history is of that attorney. And they look to us, I believe, for information.
Yeah.
They don't know that an attorney does or doesn't do real estate. So it's a conversation to be had. But for the most part, the agent refers the attorney. And it's good. They have a great relationship back and forth. There's a lot of paperwork that goes back and forth. And it's just a way to keep the client from having to worry about that paperwork being moved around and stuff.
Okay.
The agent takes care of it. They have that relationship with the attorney. Whoever their favorite attorneys are that do a great job. And they take care of that part of it.
In terms of costs, though, to the borrower, so for a two-part question, let's say you have 5 attorneys that you typically recommend, are the charges to the borrower kind of comparable, and also how do those fees get paid?
Yeah, so the buyer pays the fees.
That's part of the closing
costs?
That's
part of the closing costs. So when we disclose the loan estimate, it's on there.
Oh, okay.
It's just an estimate at that point. We kind of take averages of what attorney charges.
Okay.
And you are going to see differences with attorneys. And some do more for you. Some of them will do a municipal search for you. Some of them will do lien
What's
search.
a municipal? I'm sorry.
Municipal search is making sure there's no open permits. Like if somebody did some work to their house and they didn't close out the building permit, that would show up in a municipal search. That's a hard word to say.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Okay.
So it's just a slightly more in-depth title search.
Okay.
It's a little little side title search. So some are going to do more stuff for you. Some, I don't know what I was gonna say. Just lost it.
Um,
So the title insurance part. So title insurance is provided from the attorney. Title insurance is set by the state of Connecticut. So no matter what attorney you go to, no matter what level of expertise they have, the title insurance is going to be the same. It's based on your purchase price and it's
Okay.
based on your loan amount.
okay.
So and there's 4 or 5 different title insurance companies and they all have the same rates.
Okay, good.
So that part is going to be the same attorney to attorney. The attorney is going to explain that to them, what title insurance is, and it insures your title.
Mhm.
It makes sure it's saying, yep, we did a title search. Here, you own this piece of property. It is now yours. Nobody else has a right to your
Okay.
to your to your title. The example I've used for years is, out on the other part of the state, out in the eastern part of the state, when the Mohegan tribe, came along and said, "You stole this property from us hundreds of years ago," and yep, we did. Somebody did steal that property from them, and the property was given back to them. And there was people who had ownership in land that they lost it. Title
Wow.
insurance would insure you for something like that. Because you
Oh,
thought you were getting clean title and something got missed along the line.
I
That's a way out
that's
there.
that's an extreme
Example,
example,
but
but that's the
that's
point.
kind of a good, like, okay, oh, okay, here, you take it.
Like, God
Yeah.
forbid something
Yeah.
hadn't come up in the title search and then it comes up
Right.
at some point later
Right,
on.
and it does every now and then. It does.
Sure.
It does. Title insurance company, your title insurance actually does more than that. I don't want to get too in depth. Say the seller, and this actually comes up a lot. Say the seller had a mortgage that they refinanced 7 years ago, but the release was never recorded on the land records. But it's clear based on everything you can see that that mortgage was paid off. There's a new mortgage that is listed on there, and it makes total
Right.
sense. But this mortgage is still sitting open
Right,
on there.
right.
Title insurance company will review the whole situation and be like, you know what? We'll do the research. We'll find this release for you. Go ahead, sell this property. Go ahead, close on it, and we'll do this research for you in the background and get this taken care of. Stuff like that. The title insurance company will kick
Okay.
in for. And
Oh,
that
so it's
happens
really
a lot.
important.
It is, and it's not optional. A lender will require you to have title insurance coverage up to your loan amount.
Sure.
And then there's optional up to your purchase price.
So
That's what.
that's actually going back to fees. I was going to ask.
Yeah.
The only time that you ever really see those fees being significantly higher is based on like a higher purchase price.
Correct. Correct. And I believe I used to be a real estate paralegal, so I used to know all these rules inside and out, but it's been 25 years now. But I believe over a $500,000 mortgage amount, there's, one of those extra add-ons there. So I think once you hit that $500,000, it's more than less than $500,000. Got to get our money.
Yeah, man. Everybody's trying to get a nut.
Yeah, but that's right. But it's required. It's there's no waiving it. If you buy the house cash, you do whatever you want. Your attorney is probably
so
going
risky
to wreck it. Right. Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, buying cash is great. You still want to cover your
Absolutely.
Your
Absolutely.
butt.
Yeah, people don't realize how important the title search is and how important title insurance is. And hopefully that's something their attorney is going to stress to them.
Yeah.
Again, a good attorney. Your attorney is there to protect you, not necessarily just save you money. Not like, people be like, well, how can I save $1,000?
Right.
Oh, just forget about the title insurance. It should not be ever looked at that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's $1,000, but
right.
it's still it's your property.
Right. 1,000 relative to
$100,000
what you're right,
dollars.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like there's the 3 most important partners in the purchase of a house is really the real estate agent, the lender, and the attorney. It sounds like that's a trifecta.
It is.
In the name of the
agent,
lender,
the attorney,
and attorney.
Yes. Yeah, and we all work with people day in and day out who do this for a living.
Yeah.
Your agent, you're using an experienced agent. Take your agent recommendations.
Yeah, man.
They know who's going to represent you. They're not trying to force you into using anybody. There's no kickbacks anywhere between any of us.
Well,
There's no
laws
kickbacks.
have been established to avoid that sort of stuff.
Right.
So.
We are working in your best interest. We know what attorney is going to take really good care of you. If you don't know a real estate agent that you want to work with, reach out to me. I work with agents all over the state. Mm-hmm. I can match up personalities. I know who's going to take good care of you, depending on your needs. There's lower end buyers that some agents will be like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I
They just can't be
know, I
bothered.
don't, right, I can't be bothered, and they just don't know that market, so you don't want them working for you. And
Mhm.
it's the opposite way. Somebody who primarily does say stuff in New Haven, you don't want them going down to Greenwich and
Right.
trying to sell a house in there because they don't know the market. So you and I work with agents all day long. We
Yeah.
know who's going to help you. Your agent has a book of people that they work with.
Yeah.
Take that referral.
Yeah.
The home inspection person, your septic person, your attorney. Your attorney's key. They're your attorney.
The only person in that whole list that we can't mess with or recommend is the appraisal.
Correct.
Because that's got to
Correct.
be a totally
That's
independent.
got to be totally
person.
independent. Yeah, that's
But
another one of those things that came out of the crash in 2008. You either have to have an outside company ordering them for you, or you have to have an inside appraisal management
I mean, it's
system.
it's
We
strict
can't.
though.
We
Like
can't.
as the loan officers, as
We
the
can't.
assistants, we can't even talk to them.
We're
we can't
not
be
supposed to
emailing
talk to them.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be no influence on the
Yeah,
appraiser at all.
exactly.
Yeah.
But anybody else related to the interaction, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you. Take the recommendations
Yeah.
seriously. Like
Yeah.
consider them.
Absolutely. It's their
Homeowners
job.
insurance, even.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Yes. Yeah, I have a whole nother story on
Oh
that, but
yeah.
that's another unit.
For another day.
That's another day. Yeah, but the attorney's pretty important.
All right.
Legal.
Yeah. Very good. Cool. Bye.